Good morning, everyone. We will begin the session in 1 minute. Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this product demonstration webinar to show you how you can speed up your quality process with HiQA. I am Lisa Sterling, your host and moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I would like to mention just a couple of housekeeping items. We invite you to ask questions throughout the presentation by typing in your Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, as your phone is muted during the session. We will address the questions received at the end of the presentation. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available in a few days for playback. I would now like to introduce you to our presenter for today, Tim Hogan, Vice President of Business Development for HiQA. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Tim.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a lot of new people, especially we've met from IMTS and a lot of the shows that have been going on. So we thought it might be helpful to outline and go over HiQA and how we can help streamline your quality process to save time, well, and money, and sometimes having not to add additional personnel. So how do we do that? So we're going to present slightly different today. Instead of running through a big PowerPoint and kind of PowerPointing it to death, we're going to spend the vast majority of our time together today in the product itself with a live presentation and demonstration of what HiQA does and what the software can provide for you from an efficiency standpoint. So really is 75% a realistic number? A lot of times we throw out there 75%. And we as a company, we typically say you can save at least 50% of your time. However, our customers do tell a different story. It's not uncommon for our customers to see a 75% savings from their existing process. Well, let's consider an example. How long do you think it would take to create a CNC process for this part, including tool selection, creating tool paths, cutting the part, and everything else from start to finish? Well, when we asked the CAD/CAM people this, they said typically about 2 hours it would take to do that start to finish. Now, the beauty of this is that it's all done in one single system in the CAD/CAM world. So how long do you think it would take to balloon this print, extract the GD&T, create an inspection plan, assign inspection tools, collect actual results, create reports, compile gauge R&Rs, capability studies, control plans, PFMEAs, and everything else? Roughly speaking, from the survey that we did, about 10 hours. So literally, it's about a 5-to-1 ratio of how long it takes to measure the part and create all the documentation associated with it, as opposed to what it takes to actually make the part. So we need to change things. And what we frequently hear from a lot of shop owners or plant managers or whomever, it usually goes something like this. It says, look, I can add machines, I can add production, I can add capacity. I can even buy robots to load the machine so I don't need as many people on the shop floor. But where I'm struggling is finding people and resources to complete all the documentation needed for my full quality process, whether it's for PPAP or DMR or whatever process you're using. And quite honestly, they're stuck in a quandary because if they add more people to do the paperwork, it typically adds to the overhead cost and makes the piece price go up to where they may or may not be awarded the job. But if they don't add the people, they run the risk of not shipping on time and therefore potentially losing the business or future business because of misshipments. And in our current times, we could also add the availability of employees. The ability to add qualified employees and retrain them and also retain them is becoming increasingly challenging and putting further strain on the overall system. But why has so much focus and emphasis been put on streamlining the manufacturing process and making the parts better and faster with more robotics and automation and process control, while very little has been applied to the quality documentation side? What if we could automate the quality process to be as fast, if not faster, than the manufacturing process? And that's where HiQA comes in. From a 2D print all the way through manufacturing and submission, we can help control and streamline your entire process digitally. Right? That's right. This is not a file management system where you're creating files and documents and Excel sheets and then retaining them in some type of system. This is a database-driven solution that provides complete transparency of the part record and increases collaboration between departments, especially manufacturing and quality. Okay, so this is the entire process that we're going to really dig into today. So I promised to be short and not PowerPoint you, and that was very, very short. So we're going to start digging into the software itself and then seeing how we can make things fast, because that's what our theme is for today. Okay. So we are in Inspection Manager right now. I am trying to get rid of this little toolbar at the top here and pardon me for a quick second. So, okay, we'll just kind of go as it is, as we do. So this is a 2D PDF, and this is, we love to say that, hey, we're developing, we're evolving, things are going to 3D, embedded GD&T, PMI, and that's absolutely true. And honestly, we support that, meaning we support it inside the software where we can take a 3D model, you can see 3D right there, with embedded GD&T and utilize that information for the automatic development of inspection plans right in the software. So we do support that. However, the vast majority of our customers still get their prints in a 2D format from their customer. So here we have a 2D print. This is just a regular PDF. And we simply come up here to Auto Balloon and click on Auto Balloon. And we support several things here. We support multiple pages. You can turn on and off basic dimensions, reference dimensions. But we're just going to click on, go and let it run through its system. We can also do what's called split subcharacteristics. Some of our customers want to break these down into multiple, like 2, 3, and 4, as opposed to just number 2. Either way. So right now we are analyzing the print. I have to talk faster. It's moving too fast. So we've analyzed the print. We've scanned it, tried to disseminate out what's a dimension, what's not, what's GD&T, what's linear, what's basic. And we've already extracted all this information out and put it in the bill of characteristics. So we have, in just a few seconds, at 20 seconds or so that it took, we've already ballooned the print, extracted it all, and put it in the database. Because again, as I mentioned, this is a database-driven solution. So everything we do is available real time in a database. You can even have multiple people logged in at the same time working on the same part because it is a database solution. So we'll scale this back down here a little bit. So we can do multiple things while we're in here. And there's some neat tools in the software that help streamline things, but not only streamline them and make them faster and more efficient, but it also makes them more accurate. Let me change this right here. And for example, I can take this information and say, this is my part name. And now you can see my part name is now updated right there. I can take my part number and say, this is my part number. Now, not only is this more efficient, it's also more accurate, because as long as the resolution is, I'll say it's somewhat decent. It doesn't have to be perfect by any means. As long as it's somewhat decent, we're going to pull out the correct numbers and letters that are associated with this to help reduce errors if you have to manually type them in. So we can also balloon notes. So we can come up here and say, I want to balloon this note, for example, and I can easily select this. And I apologize, I don't have decent notes on here, but you can see how it works just by box selecting that. We can see it now in our bill of characteristics down at the bottom here. And if we go over to the side here where the details are, we have the OCR work to figure out what those letters were and what those numbers are. And you can see it over in the notes section right there. And you can do as many of these as you need, right? However many notes you want. You can also number them accordingly. Like maybe I want this as number 1 and this is number 2. You can certainly do that. And then we can also lock those to where those will like always be number 1 and number 2. And then the rest of them would be numbered, you know, starting at the number 3. A couple other really neat features of the software. And again, we're all about streamlining and making things faster and more efficient. Let's say, for example, we have a hardness spec on the print. And also keep in mind, this can be for any type of specification on the print. Maybe if there's, if you're in the hydraulics industry and there's a port call out on there, and the port, when you look it up in the machinery's handbook, has, you know, the addendum and the dedendum and the minor and the major and tooth spacing and all these different requirements. Well, what we can do is put this in what we call an extension template. And we just simply click on this button over here and say, add this extension template. And I have it set up in the system to where this H25 specification is really related to the temperature and time. So we need to add temperature and time specification to this hardness spec. So we can simply hit apply, we hit yes. And now in our bill of characteristics, we can see that we have 29.1, 0.2, and 0.3, and we have temperature and time listed as requirements in the database against this H925 specification. So again, this is all about making things consistent and streamlining it to where you can enter something in and then have, you know, something else, in this case, temperature and time, pulled up and automatically populated. Okay. We can also identify material. So if we select our little material button right here, and again, we're just going to box select it just like we have the rest of the time, and it's going to automatically analyze what material we're talking about. And right up over here in our the area over to the right, we can see that this switched to materials and processes. The information that we selected is now populated in here as the name, and we can even add more information to it. Let's say there's a code, a special code that we put in here, or maybe there's a specific specification number that we use. Whatever you need to do, quite honestly. Most of our customers simply come in here and with this material spec, they will upload a sample materials or a material certification, excuse me, I have a sample one here. And then when they hit save and close, now you can see the little file right up here, and you can see that the sample material cert is attached to it. Now, this is another power of the database itself, right? Because now that this information is the database, you'll never lose it. Meaning, if you, and what you'll see a little bit later on, is that when we go to create an inspection report from this information for the material will be automatically populated on the FAI, okay? So just some additional functions of the system that help to streamline things and make them faster and more efficient for you. But Let's continue on a little bit more and just some different functions of the software itself. Right, so we have this specification, for example. We can see that there's actually 3 different callouts here: the diameter, the thread, and the position. And we have a 4x callout as well, so it's 4 times those 3 dimensions. And if we look down in our bill of characteristics, we can see that we have identified the 3 different callouts themselves, and then the 4 different places for each of those dimensions. So the database, when we go to acquire data, will be looking for 12 different entries of data. And if we did want to break those out, we could simply click on this button right here and uniquely identify each individual hole if we needed to get down to that level of transparency inside the cell, excuse me, inside the database itself. And you can also see down in the bill of characteristics, our multiplier is gone, and we have 12 different lines of data now as opposed to the 3. Okay. But you don't have to. You could simply, undo that, if you will, and now we're back to the 4x down here. We also have this function, so we don't claim to be perfect, right? So we can, if we, it did capture all of them here, but let's say hypothetically it didn't, right? Let's say it missed that one. Sometimes it's very hard to see a lot of these because they're, very complex and very busy prints. We have this function called whiteout that when we click on that, now you can easily identify what it missed because it whites out everything that it did obtain. Okay, so now we can easily see that, oh, I missed that one. So we'll just, you don't have to zoom in, I just did it for clarity. But now if you have to manually balloon this, we click on our little scissor icon right here. And very similar to what we've already done, right? We just box select it, and as soon as I let off, it's going to figure out what it is over on the side here. It does what we call parsing. And you can see that it figured out it is a 2, and it's a linear dimension, and it applied the tolerance from the tolerance block. So it grabbed all of that in a second or 2 that it took to do that. Okay, if we click off of it, now we can see that it's the whiteout kicks in again. We can see that it did attain that. So we can turn it off, and we can see everything is back to being ballooned. However, we are out of sequence too, right? I named those bottom 2 dimensions number 1 and 2. So it sequentially put the next 2 in line for what was 1 and 2. And we also have dimension number 30 here. Now we simply come up here and click on renumbering, and it puts everything right back to where it was before. And we can also renumber in different ways. By default, this is set up for like left to right, top to bottom. But if you'd like to renumber by views, and even within that, if you'd like to number by spiral, by pie chart, horizontal, however you'd like to do it, we do support multiple ways. Or sometimes your customers have different ways that they want it done. We support those as well. Okay, so let's get into some of the deeper levels of the software itself. Okay, let's take, for example, this 2-inch dimension. So if we take this dimension right here, we also will come over here, and we have what's called gauge category and characteristic designator. And for gauge category, this is actually going to streamline a few different things for us, okay? And you'll see them as we go here within the next 40 minutes or so. One of the aspects we probably won't have time to get into is more of the submission package documentation, meaning control plans, PFMEAs, process flow diagrams. What we can do here is as we populate it here, I guess is a better way to say it. So as we populate it here, we can use this information to automatically populate the control plan later on. Okay, so we don't have to create a control plan. We're actually generating it from the information here. But also you'll see where it helps to streamline the process for shop floor data acquisition. And you'll see that in just a few minutes here. So for example, if you're like a quality engineer and you have this, or even a manufacturing engineer, and you're saying, how do we want to measure this later? What's my measurement device? We can say, well, I'd like to use a caliper to measure this. Not the exact caliber, right? We're not looking for serial numbers of gauges that are being used. This is more of a category based. Also with designators, let's say, for example, is this a major? Is this a minor? Is this a key characteristic, a critical characteristic? Maybe it's a CTQ, for example. So once you have those identified, you can say, I'm going to save this. And then I'd like to draw your attention down here to the bill of characteristics, because we also have a category, or excuse me, a column for gauge category, and we can see that was updated to caliper. And we also have designator here, and that has been now updated to the CTQ, right? So in my system right here that you're looking at, I have a rule in my system that says if it's a CTQ, automatically change my sampling rate to be based on an AQL table, as opposed to default. In this case, 1 per lot was the default. So I highlight that to let you know that this is all about saving time and streamlining. You can build rules in the system that do certain actions based on certain input. So by changing it to a CTQ, I automatically updated my sampling plan. Okay. And later on, what you'll see is that the samples are automatically generated based on whatever sampling plan is put in at this in the bill of characteristics here. Okay. So additional ways that you can also streamline things. You can see that this says optical comparator. Well, I have a default in my system that says for any angular dimension, automatically make my gauge category an optical comparator. Or for any and all perpendicularities, automatically make my gauge category a coordinate measuring machine. So it did that in the first 20 seconds that it took to balloon the print. And again, it's all about speed and efficiency and effectiveness, and quite honestly, accuracy as well. But to try to paint the picture of how we can tie this information together, we talked about gauge category a little bit. If we come up here to measurement gauges, we have a full gauge management package right in the system itself. Okay. So, well, why would you have that? And we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do, just wanted to highlight a couple of the characteristics of the management package itself. All of the gauges, right? The ID, the serial number, where it is, if it's located in, or you can track locations. And I'll show you more about that in a little bit here. The maintenance, if someone else maintains it, but also most importantly, of course, right, the calibration information, calibration date, calibration interval, the certificate numbers. Also note, we can have something kind of unique here. Calibration interval, we have it to where you don't have to, of course, but you can base it off of usage. Like after how many times this caliper is used, let's go put it in a calibration cycle, okay? Because we track right here, full usage history of, oops, oh, I changed that tracking status right there and it's asking me to save it. We track the full usage history of every single dimension that a gauge checks, okay? Right down to the serial number, the job number, the lot number, what the dimension was, what the result was. We can slide over here. You know who measured it, time and date stamp, the gauge category, if it was tied to an operation, even if it was tied to a specific machine or even a non-conformance record. All of that information is captured together, so you have more transparency inside your organization as to what gauges are being used, who's using them, are they providing accurate checks. Where this is really huge, let me grab another one here. This has a couple checks to it. This has a few different ones. So let's say it checked it bad, right? So if it checked it incorrectly, well, now you can easily see when that bad check was. And then maybe if you need to quarantine parts or go re-inspect, you know exactly who measured it, when they measured it, what lot, what serial number. You have full transparency of all of that information at your fingertips. Okay. Oh, by the way, we also have notifications set up in here where we can notify you if the gauge is expiring or expiring soon, maybe like 30 days or 45 days, whatever you would like it to be. But also note, we can import your existing list, whether it's in Excel or even another gauge package. we can import that information in so you're not having to re-enter all of this information right into the system. Okay. And we do fully support wireless receivers as well. And you can see right here, we have a receiver button to where you can identify like what receiver you're using and then even a channel within that receiver. So it's a pretty comprehensive package. But let's get into manufacturing operations. So this is where we really start to see collaboration between manufacturing and quality. Because in manufacturing operations, let me zoom out here a little bit so you can see it. Within manufacturing operations, what we're doing is providing you with the tools to be able to identify which dimensions are affected by the different operations, right? Because when you get this part in, you're going to have maybe a roughing op, and then a drilling op, and then a finish op, and then a reaming op, maybe, or a plating. So you're going to break these down into different multiple operations. And those different dimensions are going to be affected by that. And that's typically a manufacturing engineer that does that. But they could, typically what we see our customers do is the manufacturing engineer will have full access to this and be able to go in and do this themselves. Sometimes we see to where maybe a quality engineer would collaborate with the manufacturing engineer and then to be able to disseminate out this information and apply it to the print and here in the database. Let me give an example of what I mean. Let's say we're going to have we're going to add a roughing operation to rough this part out. I'm just holding down control on my keyboard and I'm picking over some overall dimensions here, right? Got the step height here. We've got the overall length. We've got the overall height here. We've got the little step height here. And let's say we just come over here and say add operation. So now we can see we have multiple colors here and we have an operation, a manufacturing operation added over to the side. And by the way, you can have as many operations as you want. Maybe all of these are in op 20 and you can add op 20. Or maybe here's to try to paint a picture a little bit. We have customers that have maybe an operation for incoming inspection. And let's go back to that hardness spec to where the temperature and time comes into play. Maybe we need to record that from an incoming inspection standpoint. We could add one dimension to this. Note that it says 3 because there's 3 dimensions here, right? And notice it says 3 here. And maybe we want to name this something. Maybe we want to name it incoming. You can name them all something different. Okay, so maybe in this this first one, we'll name this roughing. You can add all of that information. Again, we won't get into this today, but I would like to paint a picture for you. Okay. See this right here, it says process. What's happened is that we've also provided some flexibility and functionality in the software to where you can identify the processes for your organization. And what I mean by that is what failure modes, what the flow is, all of the information that's usually linked to a process. We've put in what we call a library up in the system up here. I can show you where that is later if we happen to have time. But now all that has to happen is you select the process that coincides with this operation, and it will automatically generate your PFMEA and your process flow information. You don't have to enter that information or copy and paste it in. In fact, there's no such thing as copying and pasting in here. But it will automatically generate your PFMEA, your control plan, and your process flow diagram. Okay, so just want to kind of paint that picture for if that's relevant for you, be more than happy to follow up with you at a later time about that. Let's just talk about the roughing operation for right now. Now we can see we have the roughing identified here. And if we zoom out, we can see that we have the different colors associated with the different operations. Down here in our bill of characteristics, we can see that we have a manufacturing operation pull down. Now we can pull down and see our different operations here. And we can just select our roughing op, for example. And now we have a print just for our operation. Now, sometimes we have where manufacturing engineers are responsible for making operational sheets. They can simply do this right here in the software. Even if they need to maybe tweak and modify the dimension, that functionality exists as well. Like this is a roughing up. So let's say, for example, you would need to leave material for the finishing up later on. You can simply update this and go over here and say, I need to update the nominal value. Let's say, for example, you need to add 20 thousandths or, half millimeter, however much you need to add. You can add, subtract, you can multiply, you can go by percentage. This is super helpful for like plating operations, for example. If you need to reduce the overall size of something, maybe by 1% or 2% to accommodate a plating operation, you can simply do that very easily right here. But let's say you need to add 20 thousandths, for example. And by the way, you can put maybe set tolerances in here. You don't have to have them the same. You can have them different. However you want to do it. Let's say you want to measure this with a caliper, whenever you're going to measure this. And again, this is all associated only with these opt10 dimensions. This is not part of the final dimensions, right? You can even change your sampling frequency for the operation. Let's say you want to check 2 per hour. Not a problem. You can change that frequency. Now, if I say apply and close, we can see our requirement has changed, our nominal has changed, right? And we added 20 thousandths to them. We have plus 50, minus 40. Our sampling plan or sampling rule has been updated to be what we want it to be just for this operation. Even our gauge category is updated. So all that information has been updated right in the bill of characteristics, but only for this operation. And now we can even come up here and say, I would like to build an inspection plan. You can have whatever template you want here. That's more than fine. And you can simply hit create report. So now is where we'll segue a little bit and say, well, sometimes we want to go less paper instead of paperless. And actually, we just talked to a customer earlier today, and they're like, you know what, we still want to kick this out maybe into Excel and populate that. We could do that because we are in Microsoft Excel right now. And you can simply kick this up. And the reason I bring this up is because what we're going to be getting into now is bringing data back in and how we can really streamline that. And you'll see some of the extraordinary benefits of doing it in just a few minutes here. Because we're going to take this information and we're going to automatically populate it into an inspection report, okay? But we got to get the data back in the system. So one of the ways to do that would be to simply enter the information in here, whatever it is, and then we can, this Excel spreadsheet right here, we can import this form back into HighQA, okay? So that is one way that you're able to bring data back in. It is the hardest way, to be honest with you. It is the hardest way. However, meaning the most step. When I say the hardest, I mean the most steps in the system. But it is one way. Another way, the more streamlined way, would be to use our shop floor data acquisition tool. Oops, this is SBC. Let me grab the other one here. This is in IM Explorer. And I'm simply going to log in here. Each person would have their own unique login, and we do support scanning badges as well, a badge system. So when they are in the system, and speaking of system, let me maybe articulate on that a little bit. This is a very, very simple browser-based system. Now, when I say browser, I don't necessarily mean web, right? It's simply a browser-based application that's pointed to an IP address inside your facility, right? So it's not going externally. That way your data is secure and in your network. If you are, actually, let me bring up something else very briefly. You'll also notice that this little button over here says gauges. Now, being that we have all the gauges in the system and all linked together, you can actually track the location of gauges from this application. And this application can be, a lot of our customers use this on like an iPad or some type of tablet. You could have it on a computer, whatever you want. Anything that'll run Google Chrome, you can put this on, okay? But let's say you need to check, it's in a gauge crib and you need to go check out this caliper. Now you can select the category and see, here's my list of calipers, right? Oh, and here I need to check out this caliper, it's one I have. It has all of this information already because it's part of the database, right? And it already has, I'm logged in. And now I just need to say, hey, where am I taking this? Oh, I'm taking it to the inspection lab. You can say check out. And now you can see it's checked out, who has it, and the current location. So you can track location of gauges right from this browser application, okay? However, by the way, when they bring it back, they can simply check in, return to storage, bam, it's right back where it belongs. But I do want to bring up something else. So if you happen to have a manufacturing system to where a router or sometimes it's called a traveler, a job traveler goes with the job. And if it happens to have a QR code or a barcode on it, you can simply scan that barcode and have it pull up the job for them to enter information in automatically, okay? The next step that I'm about to do, you actually wouldn't have to do. It would happen automatically when you scan the barcode. But you can enter information usually in one of these two ways. We'll just go into gallery search. And now here's all the information, all the jobs in the system. And they can simply pick the job that they're currently working on and then start entering data. They can also search for a job, look for a job number, customer name, project name, what have you. Let's say you're working on order 66. And now here's my job my part for this job number, okay? And then when you go in here, go into the job itself, you can see we have a really neat dashboard that shows, hey, how complete is this inspection? Are there any bad dimensions or failed dimensions in it? Very easy to see. And now that I'm in this lot, we can see if it happens to be broken into lots, you could see multiple lots here, but you'll also see samples right here, right? So this is where we want to tie some information together, right? In this main system, when we were setting up the sampling rules, we set this one up for this particular job for order 66 as 1 per 20 parts. So now you see, well, that we needed a first piece inspection, right? A full 100% FAI. And then you have part 21, part 41, part 61. So it's 20 after that. So based on the sampling plan that we identified, these samples were automatically developed and put in the system when that job was entered, okay? So that's just kind of painting the picture of how things are streamlined for the process later on. And if we go into, let's say we're working on part 21, for example, you can see right up here, it says finished part. Well, maybe we're on our roughing operation, right? So we're just going to select our roughing operation. And now we can see we just have our dimensions for our roughing operation. And by the way, this is very dynamic, right? You can tell this is meant for more of a touch screen type look. This is fully dynamic. You can move it around, zoom in to get a better view of things, zoom out. You can even change the view to where it's larger so you can see it a little bit better. We do have a scale across the bottom here for the whether it's a machinist or a shop floor inspector, whomever, to be able to automatically see at a quick glance, where the tolerance range is. So maybe if they accidentally, re-zero the caliper wrong, and they can easily see that. By the way, we can also provide you with a method for a little bit along the lines of document control, because we can or you would be able to upload all of your work instructions or gauge instructions, and they would show up right here. I should put one in here. So you can see them, but you can have all your document control from a work instruction, gauge instruction standpoint, and they're all tied to the specific dimensions. So everything, again, is tied together, right? But So before we put a category, and you can see the category right here says, hey, use a caliper to measure this. Well, now is where we go in and select the exact caliper we're using. We can say what tool and gauge are we using. And because we had selected that category of caliper, now it only shows us a list of calipers. So it's a streamlining thing for the people on the shop floor, or whoever is entering this information. It helps to streamline that process. Not only would this be populated on the control plan as well, but it also streamlines this list. So it's just trying to bring back around the idea that when you are planning things initially, it helps to streamline and make everything better downstream. Okay. So anyway, we'll select the exact tool we're using. Let's say we're using tool 002 for this. And now you can see, you can probably see, or hopefully see, that this is blinking right here. This box here is blinking. So with this box blinking, that simply means that it's listening. So it's listening for maybe a Bluetooth device, a wireless device, maybe an RS-232 out, some type of input device. So it'll automatically enter it, hit the button on the caliper, the capable caliper, micrometer, or height gauge, what have you, and it would automatically populate in there. But if it doesn't, that's fine. You could simply enter the information in right here, click accept. It's real time and live in the database. So it automatically turns green and then it jumps to the next one. This information would be automatically populated in this system as well. So you would be able to go in here and see this data as well. We also do support like pass failed. If this happened to be a pass fail gauge, you could simply select it like that, and you can see it jump to the next one. But let's say that it measured it incorrectly, or maybe it's really out of spec, something along those lines. So we'll enter in a number here that's out of specification. We'll hit accept. But now it says, wait a minute, this is out of tolerance. Are you sure? You can measure this again or just adjust the value. Maybe you accidentally typed in the wrong number. So it doesn't save it in the database until you confirm it. All right. This really helps for the, hey, oops, wrote down the wrong number or what have you. So it's a double check in the system to make sure the data is accurate. But let's say it really is bad. We can say, all right, we need to keep this failed, and it can automatically pop up with a non-conformance record to fill out right at the point of failure. And if we were to select add new, here's a brand new non-conformance with a unique non-conformance number. And by the way, this is configurable too. And maybe they need to repair it. Maybe it's scratched. You can put notes in there. You can tie it to a specific machine or inspection center. But a lot of this information is automatically populated because it's part of the database already. We can hit OK. And by the way, these would be your defect codes, whatever makes sense to your facility. Hit OK. And now we have a brand new nonconformance that was created based on all this information. And it has all of the data together, the sample, the gauge, the inspector, all the information is in the database. And we even have notifications to where if there's a nonconformance created, notify these people that there's a new NCR in the system. Okay. So that's an example, and you can see it's red right here too, because it's bad. It's an out of spec check. So that's an example of how all the information can kind of work together, and it's real time and live in the database, right? And if we have time, hopefully we do, I'll also kind of show you a very quick view of our shop floor SPC tool, to where we can do all this real time in the database and track SPC at the same time. So you're seeing real live SPC, okay? But so that's the second way. I mentioned there was 3 ways to get data in the system. So this is a direct feed, like from the shop floor, like an acquisition tool. But let's say you have an automated measurement system, like a CMM or a Keyence system. We are what's called software agnostic, meaning we don't care what software it is, where it came from, who makes it, if it's PCDMIS or Calypso or CMM Manager or MeasureMind or the Keyence system, whatever it is, honestly, we don't really care, because if we go into our machine sync, what happens is whenever your measurement device is done, we're going to set up a folder for the information or the report to write to it. Okay, so once your CMM writes the information to that folder location, we're going to be listening to that folder location, and we're going to set up a schedule of how often to listen to that location. Okay, and then we will, whatever is brought in will show up in this screen here, and then we'll automatically process it. So what I'm about to show you next is bringing in data. We're simulating bringing in data from a CMM, but this would actually happen automatically in the background from when you push the button on the CMM to say, measure. That's the last step that you would have to do before the data is actually in the system itself. Okay, let's go back to the dimension editor. So I'm going to simulate that right now by saying import inspection results. This would be an example of like a comma delimited file that would come from your inspection device, no matter what it is. And when it comes in, it would be automatically populated and generated right on the report itself. You can kind of see right here, it automatically shows it that, green is good, red is bad, gray is missing information, okay? And I'll tell you why it's missing, because it's a thread. So we invert the color order when we're bringing in information. So for example, the green on this side would represent the diameter, the green on this side represents the position, and the gray represents the thread itself. So if we select this, now imagine you're like in the QC lab or something like that, and you have an inspector that's, okay, I'm doing my final and I need to do some manual measurements along with my automated measurements. So the CMM gets done, automatically populates it right in here, right under this sample number right here. And by the way, as you measure new parts or whatever, they're just added as new samples in the list. Not a problem at all. There's no limit to that either. But over on the side, you can see here's our diameter, for example, and we can select, go forward here. We can see, okay, this is our thread. This was the missing information, right? Because our result's missing. Now, the same is true here as it was on our shop floor system. You need to know who measured it, and I'm logged in here. What gauge did you use? And then what was the result? Passed. We hit save, and now it turned green, right? So now we have data against it, and it's right in the system, and all that information has been logged into the system. And now that we have the data and the requirements, if we wanted to kick this out into a inspection report in FAI, we can simply go into inspection report and say single piece, by the way, multiple piece. And this is also important as well. We have a report designer, and we can import your own templates. We are not, we're not of the mind of, hey, we have an inspection report, here it is, you have to use our report. Not at all. We give you the full functionality to be able to have as many reports as you want and any type of customization you want to that report. Okay, for example, that you would have just a selection of your report templates in here. You could click on create report. And again, this is the single piece, so we'll just have the one piece. But this kicks it out into Excel, and this would be like your header up here and your logo. Here's where all the information was, the OCR, right, collected it from the print. So most of that was automatically collected. Form 2, in this case, is our material. So here's the information, codes and spec numbers that we entered. Here's the material that we grabbed off the print. And even in our attachments, here's our sample material cert that we uploaded, right? All part of that system because it's all in the database. And then our Form 3, here's all of our information, all our requirements, what it was, what the tolerances are, the data that we required from the CMM and manually, right? Here's that thread that I just entered a minute ago, what the gauge category was for that. And by the way, we can also set this up customized to where This would be like the gauge serial number itself. So you know the exact gauge used for that. We can also tie this information to a non-conformance number if there was one associated with it. All of that information is completely transparent and available for you to make the form however you want, even like the location on the print where the dimension was itself. So all that information is captured in there. And for example, I'll close this. Now I didn't hit save, I didn't hit save as, nothing else. And I don't need to, because everything we do is in the database. If I select reports, here's the AS9102 report that we just did, the FAI, and here's that inspection plan that we did for OP10. So all that information is captured and in the database already. Okay, so we're not losing anything. We're not losing any of that information. Okay, let's roll very briefly. We have just a couple minutes. I would like to, a couple minutes before we roll this into questions and answers, I would like to open and at least show you what the SPC side looks like. I'm going to open a different part here, and it's basically the same exact part, except we have 30 pieces of data in here, right? So as we entered more information in, they simply were added as multiple samples, but it's the same part. So in order to track SPC, it's literally the click of a button, because that's the importance of getting the data back into the database, whether it's from the shop floor, whether it's from a CMM, whether it's from another measurement system. Getting the data back into the database allows us to analyze it in a different way. Do you want to just include it into an FAI? No problem. Would you like to track statistics? We can do that as well. For example, again, I just selected this, and over here is where we entered the information in, right? Same exact screen. But down here at the bottom, we have AQL and SPC. If I click on that, all we need to do is click on this little button right there, check that box. And for every box that's checked, sorry, this menu system keeps popping down on me, I apologize. For every box that's checked, you could come in here and see run data on it. For example, if I click into this one, you have the full run chart listed right here, all the capability information right there. You have different like X bar and R charts up here, even histogram, you can see what your distribution is, calculated control limits. All that information is there already once you get the data back in the database. I mentioned before also about our shop floor tool. Let me log in here very quickly. In same spot we were before, except we're in SPC instead of Explorer. And we can even go in here, let me grab the SPC. So this is the same exact information we were looking at a second ago, because if you see SPC yes and SPC no, that means you want to track SPC on it or not. And for those that you do, you could have this right on your shop floor and track SPC ongoing. I'm getting a little older, so I like to have bigger charts. But the neat thing about this, I mentioned before about you can track this in real time, because as you are entering this information in, you can see it here. For example, if I click on this one, you can see this little blue circle thing come up. And here's additional information on it, right? The SPC points, what your target, what the capability values are. But right from this screen, see this button right here for measure? You can measure right out of that screen and enter your information in here and track it real time. You can see exactly where it is, exactly where it shows up. And to give you another idea of how we can kind of correlate things back and forth, as they're entering information here and see it real time, it's the same exact information that's right here that you can track and see real time. So we also have notifications set up to where if an out of tolerance condition, notify someone. So you could go into, they could enter it here, right? They could enter that information here. And then I should pick the same dimension, sorry about that. someone could be notified and you could log into this system right on at your desk and see the exact same data that was just entered out on the shop floor. That's one of the powers of the database, is full transparency of real-time data, no matter where it's collected. Okay, that should do it. Sorry, I kind of ran a little long there for question and answer, but I'll roll it back to Lisa for Q&A.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim, for sharing with us ways that we can speed up our quality processes. Let's dive right into Q&A. If you have not submitted a question yet, feel free. You can type into either the chat or the Q&A tab at any point. And let's take a look. We've actually had several questions come in already. Okay, the first question says, can we collaborate with suppliers through HighQA for data and/or document exchange?
Yes, actually you can. So there's a couple ways you can do that. Actually, we have a full supplier management system to where you can create like say the balloon print, the inspection plan, or what have you, and pass that down to your supplier electronically. And the super amazing thing about that is that when they submit it back to you, it comes right back into your database so that you can see exactly what happened on their end, but it's as if you did it yourself. It's as if it went to your shop floor. So what it provides for is the opportunity to see data on your suppliers as an extension of the shop floor, as opposed to it being, a whole separate unit, a whole separate entity that just deals with suppliers or supplier quality, basically SQEs, for example. So yes, we have a really, really neat system for
that. Okay, perfect. Here is the next question. It says, can we attach documents from SharePoint?
You can attach anything you need. So it has that full functionality into it. So from SharePoint, where we'll get into a little bit of a challenge is if you want a link, right? If you want to like embed a link to it and then it links to something else, sometimes that's a little, it's a permission level based thing, right? So we got to be careful of permissions. But from an attachment standpoint, absolutely. You like it to attach it as part of the FAI, not a problem. Attach it as part of the submission package requirements, not a problem either. Let me kind of just give you a very, very brief example of what I mean. If you, for example, I'm in the wrong spot here, I apologize. I'm getting where I need to go. If it was part of a submission package, for example, like here's your process flow and your PFMEA and your control plan and all of this information that was automatically generated from data that we already have, you could simply put it in here as an attachment to one of these or as its own, like as you can see right here, materials and processes. You just need to add an additional form in here for your submission requirement. Absolutely, not a problem. And then it's in the database and in the system, so you'll never lose it.
Great. Okay, here's another question. It says, I assume that you support a lot of manufacturers for wireless receivers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it's yes, correct. Not a problem. So in the system itself, as you're entering data against it, literally we're going to be listening for any type of input, but you can also be selective in your input. What I mean by that is that in the measurement gauge portion itself, you can see right here it says USB receivers, and you can set up specific receiver names and channels within that. We don't, it's not just Mitutoyo. We just happen to have Mitutoyo in here. But if you have like a Fowler or you have a Starrett gauge or something like that, or a old Brown and Sharp, actually, I don't know or a TESA height gauge or something like that, yes, we can populate that information directly in here.
Excellent. Okay, this question says, does it interface with tool data such as from GaugeTrack?
You can, so one of two things. We have customers that want to maintain their GaugeTrack for, they have their own reasons. And at a certain frequency, they will re-import their gauges into the system. So you can do that if you want. What the vast majority of our customers do is they simply go into the gauge list and they say import gauges, and they can through GaugeTrack you can export, and then they'll simply import it into here, so you're not having to re-enter all that information, and everything is consistent with what you already have in GaugeTrack.
Okay, perfect. Here's the next question. It asks, we are doing a lot of FAIs. Is it possible to print the Form 3 but blank of recorded measurements? We spend a lot of time just preparing Form 1, 2, 3 of the FAI.
Yes, absolutely. You can do that. But to be very, very transparent with you, that's why a lot of times during these webinars and demonstrations, I really try to stress the importance of getting the data back in, because it allows you so much more flexibility in creating those FAIs. Because can you, but can you? Yes, absolutely go in and create your FAI without any sample data. Right when we were at the very, very beginning, oh, wrong part. Let me open up the part we were doing before. And when we were at the beginning, you could say inspection report, I want to create this FAI. And right here, you see the select sample. You could just kill the sample altogether and say create report. And that would actually put all the information in the bill of characteristics and populate your Form 1, your Form 2, and then your Form 3 is now blank, right? So it's looking for that result data. But now you have to go in and say, well, here's the result. Is it good or bad? What tool did I use? And was it tied to something else? So you still have a lot of manual entry that needs to be done from here to where once you get the data back in from a CMM, from shop floor or whatever, it's automatically populated and in here. But to answer your question, can you do it this way? Absolutely, it's right here.
Okay, excellent. Here's the next question. Can we install it on a SQL Server?
Yes, actually, we are SQL. This is a SQL database. So we can do a couple different ways. We work with your IT group, and sometimes your IT wants to, let's call it partition part of your database out separately for this data. Absolutely not a problem. We can install a new instance of a SQL Server or even a SQL Express database, if you will. Absolutely. We work with your IT to however you want to work it, quite honestly.
Okay, sorry, I'm just scrolling through. There's so many questions. Bear with me. Okay, the next question. How does it handle multiple prints of the same part?
Oh gosh, that is so cool. I love our revision control. I'm sorry, I've been with the company about 1.5 years, and I just get really excited about certain portions of it. Our PQP, I was in manufacturing for many years. Our PQP just streamlines things so much. But another thing that really streamlines things is our revision control. So you can see up here, we have our revisions tab, and we've done this a few times. And essentially what we do, and I know we're running short on time, so I won't show it to you here, but I'd love to show you at maybe a private demonstration or something. Our revision control. So what we do is we make a duplicate copy of everything that's here. Okay. So this is, let's say this is Rev B. Okay. So let's say we got a Rev C print in. What we do is we create a new revision, right, of that. And so we're duplicating this. And when we duplicate it, we give you the option. If I come in here and I just say add revision, we give you the option to copy those materials, results, and reports over, or if you want to keep them completely separate, right? Mutually exclusive. So it really depends on what you want to do and how you want to do it. There's no right or wrong. But for example, if you want to copy the results over so you can maybe keep going on your ongoing SPC, not a problem at all. However, once it's in here, what we do is we take the Rev C drawing and we overlay it. We give you the tools to overlay it directly on top of here. And then you can easily see the differences from one to the next. And you don't have to re-balloon it because those balloons will show up the exact same spot. And then if you need to add them or if there need to change it or any tweaks, We have the tools in there too, to where you can add new ones, delete ones that are maybe gone, or if they like move a view, for example, they love to do that, don't they though? Take an entire, section AA view and move it. You can actually take those dimensions and move them because they're the same, they're just in a different location. Not a problem. We take care of all that for you. And as you do that, you'll be able to maintain all of those changes in what we call the current revision. But you'll also have a link to the previous revision, so you always see what those changes were in the system. It's a really, really cool way that we handle revision control. So sorry, that was a long answer, but I get excited about revision control.
Perfect. Okay. Someone is asking about the licensing structure. Is it a name structure or concurrent licensing?
Great question. It is concurrent user licensing. So, this works out. If you want to develop or implement it, we're going to come to you and say, okay, how many users are in the system? And you're going to say, well, I probably have, this many quality engineers and this many shop floor people that I want to use in the system. And then our next question is going to be how many people at the same time, what we call concurrent user licensing. So, and that's how many licenses you would need. So you don't need a license for every person, just how many people need to access the data simultaneously or at the same time.
I would just briefly add that if from whatever reason there is a need for a node lock license for a specific function, you can have a mix and match of those. But typically people take the concurrent.
Okay, thank you, Effie. That was Effie. He's actually the president and of HiQA. So thank you for that addition.
Thank you.
Okay, we are a little bit past the hour, so let's go ahead and close with this final question. It says, how long does it take to train on the HiQA software?
Oh, great question. Great question. So we have a full training process that we work you through. So there's actually a couple different steps to it. And some are resources that are ongoing. And what I mean by that is that when you become a customer, not only do we have a step-by-step system to where you would go through and have training courses, and they're all recorded, they're through Teams, they're virtual, and that we support you fully on that. And then you'd also have access to those in the future to be able to review them as well. You'll also have full access to our academy, our HiQA Academy, to where this is all online. And this is also not a, hey, watch this video and let me know when you're done. This is interactive as well, right? A lot of the training programs are now. So this is dynamic. It asks them questions, and there's also certificates available afterwards, so they can, or maybe you as a manager, if there are any managers here, will have documentation that shows that they actually went through the system. It's great for their training records as well. We also have full video repository, and this is all available to you as well. And this is a full video system training course. Hey, I need help in examples of results entry in Explore, which is the shop floor data acquisition tool. Great. Now you can click into this, watch it, and then look for minute number 9 and start watching from there. You have full access to this. But getting back to the training, we take you step by step through the system, and it can go really as fast or as slow as you'd like it to, depending on your organization. We have customers that want to roll this out in a week. We have customers that take 6 months to fully implement it. But if I had to take a wild stab at it, it's usually, probably between 3 to 6 weeks to fully implement and train on the system.
Okay, great. And I bet that time goes quickly.
Very quickly.
Thank you again, Tim, for sharing all of this great information. As Tim mentioned, and I mentioned at the beginning, we have recorded the session, and I will be sharing this out via email over the next couple of days for you to share with your colleagues or watch the playback if you like. If you have any questions that come to mind later in the day or in the future, feel free to reach out at any time. Also, we are just scratching the surface of this very robust software platform in this 1-hour session today. So if you would like additional information, would like to see a personalized demo, there's a link right there on your screen that you can schedule a demo, or just go to the hiqa.com website and you'll find a link there as well. Feel free to reach out. Thanks everyone for spending the hour with us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.